Errol Morris is very much part of the DNA of this festival, and we're very grateful to have him.
A few years ago in Toronto, I saw a Q&A that you did with Werner Herzog, and you said that, and I'm not even paraphrasing here, I'm pretty sure this was true, that whenever you went to a Q&A and the interviewer came up holding a yellow pad with questions, that you were sure the interview was going to be a piece of shit. And
was that the language I used?
That was the language you used.
I'm deeply shocked.
And ever since then, I have done the ceremonial casting away of the yellow pad. So
there you go. I've had some influence.
Let me ask you about that, about interviewing, and maybe even about the idea of coming in with an agenda, coming in with a series of questions, how much you listen and how much you sit back.
I used to be a private investigator, and an interview properly considered is an investigation. If you know what questions you're going to ask and you know what the answers are to those questions, why bother? You should be there to find out something that you didn't know, something that you did not expect to hear, to learn something. And I think that is at the heart of what an interview should be about.
Do you let your subjects hang themselves sometimes?
I remember reading a story years ago. It's in a novel by Andre Malraux about the perfect executioner. The executioner who is so skillful at beheading people that they don't even know that they have been executed. I don't think that interviews are really about executing people. There is an idea of winning or losing, getting a confession of some sort. Can I make the subject cry or beg for mercy? There's a documentary film that I often reference, a film that I love, that no one seems to have seen. The Emperor's Naked Army Marches On. Has anyone seen that movie here? Oh. Yeah. It's about a man named Mr. Okazaki whose brother was condemned to death on trumped up charges by his commanding officers, shot and then eaten. And Mr. Okazaki has always been really irritated by this. And he wants an apology from the Emperor of Japan, as well as from those officers who ate his brother. So he tours Japan in a van with loudspeakers. It's one of my very favorite things in documentary films. He goes into this house, pleasantries are exchanged, there's a lot of Japanese subtitles, tea is served, and then suddenly Mr. Okazaki interrupts and he says, "That is not an answer. An answer is yes or no." And then the guy continues talking, more subtitles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then suddenly, Mr. Okazaki leaps over the table and starts beating the shit out of his subject. Now, let's be honest here. This is every interviewer's dream. Have I ever done it? I am really sorry to say, no, I have not. And I worry that it might be in bad taste. It might be misunderstood, misconstrued. You want to learn something, but the question is how you go about learning something.
Well, Errol, I do want to say that there are some documentarians who, rightly or wrongly, possibly both, feel very, very protective of their subjects. That I give the audience every chance to be generous towards you in how they feel.
I would agree with that more or less. Every interview has its own set of challenges. There's no one rule of thumb about how you go about this. When I approached Donald Rumsfeld to do The Unknown Known, I sent him a copy of The Fog of War, my film about another former Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara. I had really no expectation that it would go any further. He almost immediately wrote back and invited me to come and visit him in Washington, which I did. He told me that he hated The Fog of War, thought it was a really bad film, told me that Robert S. McNamara had absolutely nothing to apologize for, and then he agreed to make a movie with me.
I want to go back in time a little bit and talk about the first time you set up interviews and the first time you saw your subjects on camera, and how your what, for lack of a better word, we'll call aesthetic or philosophy of documentary evolved as a consequence of your feelings about your first work, whether or not you felt you had gotten to the heart of your subject or not.
This may come as a surprise. I'm something of a contrarian. I like to think that in every work of art, good work of art, properly considered, there should be a version of "fuck you." I assume you're familiar with this concept. When I made Gates of Heaven, there was a prevailing dogma about how documentary films were to be made. It was the prevailing dogma of direct cinema, cinema verite, whatever you want to call it. There are various names for it. You should shoot with available light. Don't light anything. You should use extremely lightweight equipment. It should be handheld. People should never look at the camera. You should be observing them. They shouldn't be observing you. And behind all of it was this idea, which to me seems utterly preposterous, that if you follow these rules, truth will emerge. You set up this cinematic meat grinder. You turn the crank, and out pops truth. Truth can't be guaranteed by style. Style is style. Truth is a quest. You pursue the truth. And you pursue the truth by all means available to you. Fuck you. Gates of Heaven, tried to find the heaviest cameras I could, always put them on a tripod, made the people look directly into the lens, lit everything, stylized scenes, contrived as much as I possibly could, and produced a film. I have my own personal definition of art, which is set up a series of arbitrary rules and then follow them slavishly.
Where did fuck you as a principle, an artistic principle, come from? Were you always somebody who wanted to test these rules?
I'm going to provide a very simple answer to this question. Yes.
Let's talk about Thin Blue Line insofar as there was an enormous stylistic change from Vernon, Florida, and Gates of Heaven.
First, I was just interviewing people. The interviews started to pile up. And while I was interviewing people, I was also investigating the case. One of the really fascinating things about The Thin Blue Line, and I can't really think of many other films quite like it. Of course, all of this is self-serving, but I'll say it anyway. I was not making a film as much as I was investigating a murder case with a camera. And normally you would think, well, that can't work. What are you going to find out if you just show up with a crew? And the answer is a lot. You're going to find out a lot. The interviews were crazy. I've been blessed, I have to confess, truly blessed by hearing some of the craziest stuff in interviews, often in front of a camera. In The Thin Blue Line, the chief eyewitness against Randall, Dale Adams, was this wacko, the platinum blonde witness, Emily Miller. This may be my best moment. Okay, I'll give it to you. My best moment as a filmmaker ever. Emily Miller starts telling me she had failed to pick Randall Adams out in a police lineup and started to give me all these cockamamie reasons why she had failed. You know, he's looking at me funny, I felt nervous in the lineup room, blah, 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 blah. She goes on and on and on. Why I said this to her, I'm not exactly sure. At some point, I said to her, you say you failed to pick out Randall Adams in a police lineup. How do you know you failed to pick him out? Maybe I'd seen Northside 777. Who the hell knows? How do you know you failed to pick him out? And she got annoyed with me, and she said, I know. I said, I know you know, but how do you know? And she said, I know because the policeman sitting next to me told me I picked out the wrong person and then pointed out the right person so I wouldn't make that mistake ever again. This is on film. And guess what? When I finally got access to the district attorney's files, another long story, that lineup sheet was missing. Your guess is as good as mine why it wasn't there. So it just shows you what you can do when you don't know what to expect. That's the book I want to write, What to Expect When You're Expectorating. This just shows you what you can do when you don't know what to expect in an interview.
Okay, Errol, it's a heroic effort, but I still want to know how you found the form for all this great material, because the form, was as radical as the content.
He's testing me to see if I actually can answer a question, and I'm going to prove that I can, I hope. So there's this event that we're investigating, which fascinated me, because it's at the heart of the whole story, what actually happened. Or if you like, even more specifically, who was in the car? Who was in the driver's seat? It's a question you might be wrong, even though you're absolutely confident that you're right. And so I felt I needed to do these reenactments. And I got myself into trouble immediately. So what? But I did get myself into trouble the Academy rejected the Thin Blue Line as a documentary because reenactments were no-no. Well, I've never liked the term B-roll. I don't like B-roll. I don't like lobster roll.
Let's call it visual correlatives, cinematic visual correlatives.
Fine. This is an occupational hazard. I can't help myself. I'll be sitting in an interview and somebody will say something and just an image will pop. I was trying to bring the audience deeply into the mystery of what had happened and to think about the evidence that had been provided. The deepest theme of all of my films, self-deception. Our ability to convince ourselves that something is true when it is not. What does this lead to? This leads to fascism. When evidence is discounted, when you're free to imagine anything that you choose, what stops you? Everybody wants to see the cloven hoof, as if my job is to reveal the cloven hoof. Hey, wonder what's inside that sleeve? Why, there it is! Yes, it's the Gertrude Stein idea, what she said about Oakland, California. There's no there.
I think what you've done today, and I didn't expect this sitting down, pardon me, is to draw a very fluid line from your own style, your own philosophy, your own aesthetic, looking for misperceptions, looking for the ways in which we don't want to know the truth. In tiny moments, in micro moments in your films, and you've brought it all the way to fascism and very possibly Armageddon. And I think that accounts for the urgency of your work. Even in the smallest things, even in the most trivial details, that driving urgency that suggests to us that we better recognize that we don't know so much, that we lie to ourselves so much. And I think that when we look at your films, we're going to be able to see that now. I hope so.
Thank you all for being here. What a pleasure.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Was that okay? Thank you.